Welcome dear chess friends. So, let's continue with the knight f3 variation. And after cd4 knight d4 knight c6, in the previous chapter you have seen with Alexei knight ac6, but white has also some other sidelines, and this is what we will do now. We'll analyze all the other lines for white. So first of all, white could play f4. f4 is never a serious move. And usually when, okay, never is a big word there of course, but it's not a serious move f4. And when white plays f4, you have the chance to develop the knight on h6, because no bishop h6 ideas, yeah? So normally I wouldn't even check this position, but it was once played, this line was once played by Alexenko against Ilyushenok in 2019. So I wanted to see how the game continued. Alexenko idea was c3, knight f5, knight f3. And you know what, it's more or less playable idea if black is not prepared. Because if black plays the natural move e6, very natural move, white can play bishop d3, bishop c5, let's say queen e2, then slowly knight d2, knight e1, bishop d2, long castle. It's long, but also, okay, white will have the time to do it, probably. In the while something could happen, of course, but... Okay, 0-0 for the Ng, but more or less playable for white, in my opinion. That's why we play... I recommend to play the move f6. We don't play e6 because probably we play g6, bishop g7. Let's say bishop d3, we can play g6, bishop g7, castle. We can decide if to include fe5 at some moment. It will depend on the situation, of course. And it's absolutely fine position for black. So yeah, f4, I feel that it deserves to be mentioned because of this game Alexenko Ilyushenok. But with this approach with f6 and g6, I think black has a very comfortable game and it's objectively very fine. Bishop b5. This is tricky line actually. It's tricky for the first moves, you need to be precise, but also later, if white is well prepared, it could be tricky. Because now we play bishop d7, and white's idea is knight takes c6. This is the only interesting move. Okay, people tried e6, but okay, e6, you just take it, fe6. So knight c6, only interesting move. And what is the point? If you take with the b pawn, bishop d3, we are playing the knight takes c6 line, so let's compare. It looks like we have a full extra tempo bishop d7, but bishop d7 is a bad move for us. Because you know, in this line, as you have seen with Alexei, very often our plan is a5, bishop a6. That's why, yes, after bishop b5, bishop d7, knight c6, bc6 is mistake, bishop d3, and white has an improved version of the knight a6 line, because bishop d7 is misplaced. It's better placed on c8. So this is tricky, but we can capture with the bishop, of course. If you check the statistics, majority of people take on c6, but okay. Now it's the opposite, yeah? Now we're playing the knight c6 line, where we don't even need to spend time about a5, bishop a6. We can just play knight e7, knight g6, bishop e7, castle. Of course, black is doing great. Absolutely fantastic position. Sometimes queen c7, f6. Okay, you will see these ideas a lot of times. This is just a very comfortable position. But bishop d3 is tricky. Very rare, only 8 games. Only 8 games, but tricky. Because now if you play e6, it's always useful to check normal moves, because it's very easy to play e6, to blitz out e6, and just play normal moves. But here it could be slightly better for white. For example, knight g6 I tried to analyze, knight f3, queen c7, queen g3, and this is slightly better for white, yeah? I think so. Also Engine thinks so, of course. So yeah, how to play here? So you see this bishop b5, bishop d7, only interesting idea for white is to take. We capture with the bishop, of course, and bishop d3. And now very important move, I think we have to play it if we want to equalize, is the move d4. We activate the bishop. And why it's so rare this line? Because normally people would think, okay, I need to play castle to defend the pawn on g2. But after queen d5, okay, the main point, queen d5 key move, but easy one. You threat mate on g7, on g2. Queen takes c5 next, because white will need to defend from the mate. And of course, black is better here. But white has some tricky engine line. For example, queen e2 was tried in the game Vachier-Lagrave against Idani. But queen e2 is not dangerous. We can take on g2. But taking on g2 is always a bit dangerous. Of course we can do it, it's very fine. But if you have another option, I prefer to go for something else, yeah? Because now f3 is strong move. You cannot take on h1 because of bishop b5, of course. If bishop h3, knight d2, probably a6. Okay, evaluation is 0-0. But white can play queen e4, knight c4, bishop d2, long castle. 0-0, but playable for white. Could be a bit dangerous, this one. So, I prefer to play e6. Why e6? Because if white plays castle, like in the game Vasile Dani, we can play queen d5, attacking g2, f3 logical move. Because if white plays f4, we can play knight h6 as usual, then knight goes to f5, very good position. f3, just bishop c5, knight e7, castle next, very comfortable for black. Okay, Vacher won with white. He's a strong player, yeah? He was 150 points overrated than his opponent, yeah? He won the game, very, very good for him, but it's not because of the position. This is absolutely fine for black. But I'm much more worried about the move knight d2 here. Why I'm worried about knight d2? Because now, if we play e6, short castle, queen d5, using the same idea that we played against queen e2. Now white can defend from the mate with the move knight f3, and of course it's a very good way to defend from the mate. And here we are worse, yeah. This is worse. Also, white will have rook e1, rook e4 ideas if you play short castle. No, this is worse. Worse for black. 0-70 evaluation. Or white can play for a3, b4. No, we shouldn't go for this. So here we definitely need to take on g2. That's why I'm a bit worried about this line. So knight d2 I think critical, so let me repeat. If white takes, we take with the pawn because with the bishop, because we don't want to get the worst version with the bishop on d7 or the knight a6 line. Here we don't play e6 because this is playable for white. Slightly better. We play d4, important move. If queen e2, we can just play e6 because after castle, queen d5, no comfortable way for white to defend from the mate. If f4, knight h6 as I showed you, and no problem. But knight d2 is critical because after e6, castle, queen d5, knight f3, white is better. So here we need to take on g2. Okay, here there is only one game. Horvath Dominic against Axel, so two grandmasters. Horvath Dominic is a quite tricky theoretician, I would say. So he was the only one to go for this direction, but a very interesting one actually. And this game was very recent. It was played in October 2024, so a few months ago, yeah? So I cannot exclude that somebody could try this against you. If you play on medium-high level, it's possible to face this line, because somebody can see Horvath game, engine valuation is 0-0, so it looks interesting, yeah? It looks interesting and practical line for white, because white can... If black doesn't go for this, white will be slightly better at least, yeah? So, how to play? If white plays rook g1, of course, very normal move. Here I'm not worried. Bishop c6, knight b3. We just play e6. Best plan for white is queen e2, bishop d2, long castle, but we can play many moves. But I like g6. Bishop d2, bishop h6. I want to exchange the bishops. Long castle, we can take on d2. Knight d7. Okay, yeah, queen d2. Queen d2, no, we have queen h4 also. So, rook d2 is the best, rook d2. Knight e7. And then we can choose if to play short castle. It depends on the situation. Maybe safer is to play queen c7, give back the pawn, then play long castle, no problem for black, of course. Okay, imagine you play queen c7, white will take on d4, you play long castle, of course. I don't know, for example, something like this. Rook g4, queen c7, knight takes d4, you play long castle, of course, this is no problem for black. Absolutely comfortable position, equal and very easy to play. So I'm not worried at all about rook g1. But Horvath was very well prepared, he played the move f3. Tricky move, of course, if you take on h1, bishop b5 is the idea. How to play? His opponent played a6. Natural move, yes. But useful, but maybe not the best. Because here, this was the game, knight b3. Okay, the opponent had to develop somehow, g6. Maybe it's not the best, but okay, normal move. I just want to show you how the game continued. Queen b6 with the idea, maybe long castle. Why not? Maybe rook d8. So queen d4 was played. And here, yes, here white is slightly better, definitely. Equal material, c3, good pieces, knight on d4 is good, bishop on d4 is good. Yes, this is slightly better for white. So, what is my recommendation here? My recommendation is the move queen a5. We prevent bishop b5, but with a more active move compared to a6. And we also tried queen e5 sometimes. So rook g1, bishop h3, f4 looks logical. White defends e5 and prepares queen f3, bishop e4. Good continuation. We can play long castle, queen f3. And now I like bishop e6 with the idea bishop d5, bishop e4 critical move. Here we can play something like this. This is also very fine. And e6. Okay, let's say white can take on d4. You can play bishop c5. It looks extremely interesting, something like this, yeah? And probably no problem for black. Not probably. 0-0, no problem. But I also like bishop d5. After b4, okay, we cannot take because bishop will be hanging on d5. We can play queen b5. If a4, just queen d7, no sense. Bishop b2 probably the best, we can take. e6, a3, knight h6, knight f5 next, no problem for black. So you see, yeah, here you need to have some preparation, yeah, to successfully face this line. If you have the good preparation, of course, you will face it without any problem. But in this kind of variations, to know the right direction makes the difference, yeah. Because if you just start to play from here, and your own, and your opponent is well prepared, then this is white chance to score the point, yeah. But if you know the first few moves, then it's not a dangerous line. These lines are dangerous only if the opponent is not well prepared, yeah. But you are now. You're well prepared now. So that's about bishop b5 move. Of course, tricky move, but we solved it. We can say that we solved it successfully. c4. c4 is the second important line that we check in this lesson. Okay, f4, I don't think it was important. Bishop b5 was tricky, yes, but c4, yes. c4 is probably even more tricky. And now you could, for example, play dc4 if you want. This is very playable. You can do this. Knight c6, queen d1, king d1, bc6, bishop takes c4, bishop f5. And I think this is quite practical way to play because you don't need to remember anything, basically. And you're just fine, yeah? Because, okay, I understand. From first look, it looks like white can play against the weak pawns, c6 and a7. But in reality, this is absolutely fine for black. I think we should continue to see some moves. For example, knight c3 is the most common continuation for white. Okay, we play e6. What is the problem? e6. Bishop e3, most common continuation. Very well. We just play knight e7 with the idea knight d5. Okay, white improves the king. In some other games, white played rook c1. For example, in the game Aravind Ivic. But it was an online game, but still. Rook c1. Many moves are good here. Rook b8. But let me also show you an interesting idea, g5. Why not? Because if white takes, you play rook g8 and then you can take on g2, of course. And this looks good for us. Okay, white can take on e7 and play g3, let's say, to have the extra pawn. But maybe we can take with the king. After g3, we can play bishop g7. After f4, okay, we have two bishops. We can play f6, ef6, bishop f6. This is full compensation, absolutely full compensation. And black doesn't have any problem here. If after g5, I don't know, white plays king e2, for example, normal move. Okay, we play bishop g7, we also target the pawn. Probably this is the best, we take on e5. Now the structure is already more interesting, yeah? Let's say, I don't know, g3 useful move, rook b8, knight d5, you decide, yeah? No problem here. If I play king e2, like the majority of players, you can still play g5, actually, which is a novelty, still very good move. Or you can play knight d5. So why didn't we play knight d5 here? Because here after knight d5, you see, rook c1 is more useful. We take on d5 with the pawn, bishop b3, and yes, now rook c1 is more useful. Also, almost nothing. We can play bishop d7, bishop e7, castle. Very solid position, but here white is slightly better, I can agree here. A bit, not too much. So, but here g5 is good. After king e2, okay, now we can play knight d5. No problem. Knight d5. If white takes on d5, e d5. Bishop b3, very good, but now no rook c1. We have this important extra tempo, we play long castle. And the king is ready to go to b7. If white captures on a7, of course it looks critical, but just king b7, if bishop e3 mistake because of c5. If bishop d4, just play rook e8, attacking the pawn. Only way to defend the pawn would be f4, but g5. If white continues to defend the structure, f6. And here black is better already. So probably white should play some move like rook d1, you take on e5, here some king move maybe king f1, but okay, this is minus 0-10, yeah, for the engine, so nothing. And if white plays useful move rook c1, okay, king b7, rook d1, very well, no problem, bishop b4, just development, bishop a5, bishop b6, no problem. Not easy for white to double the rooks, rook c2 non possible, rook c3, bishop b4 with tempo. So this is very good for us. If white plays king e2, we can still play knight e7. If bishop e3, we transpose, of course, with knight d5. If white plays the best move for the engine, rook d1, the best, okay, 0-0-3 evaluation, we can play knight d5, no problem. Knight d5, bishop e7 next, castle, absolutely fine position. Because you know, this structure, with the pawn c6, a7, it looks weak, but it gives you the d5 square for the knight. That's the main point. If white plays, let's say, bishop e3 here, e6, let's say white can play without knight c3, maybe with knight d2. Some other option, maybe the knight will go to c4 one day. Yes, this is possible. Knight e7 we play. Rook c1, most logical move for white. And now we play, I think this is maybe the critical line actually. Now we play knight d5, although only 4 games here. Of course, if we can take on e3, no problem. So bishop d5 critical, cd5. Again, if I place, I don't know, move like king e2, just king d7, bishop e7, rook hc8, maybe you're slightly better with the 2 bishops. So rook c7, of course, only critical move here. Yes, and this is critical because not so easy for us to develop. If you play bishop b4 with a d short castle, then knight b3, castle, and king e2. And now, yes, now white's pieces are very strong. All the pieces will be very good, and here you're worse. Here actually it's seriously worse. So, but we can avoid all of this by playing f6 move. We can play the move f6. And I think it's fine for us, because if white takes here, gf6, and this is already better. Better for black. Very often you have bishop d6 move. Just better for black, this minus 0.70. So ef6, mistake. If I place knight f3, also mistake because take and bishop d6. Yeah, so knight f3 mistake. f4 possible move. But now the pawn is not on f7, it's on f6, and it means that we can play king d8. That's nice. Okay, if white plays rook f7 anyway, okay, we can bishop g6, what is the problem? If white takes rook takes a7, normal move, yes, we can take and play fe5, fe5, pawn down, but huge compensation. This is 0-0, king d7, rook e8, 2 bishops will be very strong in this position. No problem here. The engine says that the best for white is bishop d4 here. And now we can play king d8. We should follow the engine line. It's already novelty, bishop d4. Rook b7. King c8. Rook f7 mistake because of bishop g6. So rook b5 or rook b3. One of these two moves. Doesn't change too much because I will show you now. And now we need to play a very important move. Because white is ready to play king e2 and rook c1. We need to play king d7. Important move. If white plays king e2 now we can take, and bishop d6, no problem. We support the bishop d6 move. Bishop g7, okay, rook g8, and you can take on g2 next. So, this is about king e2. If check, just go back, no problem. If rook b5, same move, king d7, that's why I told you, doesn't change too much. The best for white is to take on f6, gf6. If bishop f6, rook g8, for example g3, and every move is fine, bishop d6, rook c8, and absolutely fine for black, no problem. The best is check, that's why rook b3, rook b5 didn't change too much. King c6, rook f7, best moves. And now we can play bishop f6, very strong move. Let's say bishop f6 or rook f6, but rook f6, bishop g7, yeah? So rook f5, bishop d4. This is of course full compensation with a strong bishop. And if bishop f6, we can play rook h f8, take, bishop, let's say e5 or d4, one of the two. And now of course we don't take, otherwise we need to play with pawn down opposite color bishop endgame, could be tricky. But a5, pawn down, but we have very good prospects, yeah? So full compensation thanks to the two bishops, yeah? And this, I think, yeah, this is the best that white can achieve in this line. This is the best white can achieve. Because white could also try king e2 here, but you can play e6. Rook d1. Also, only one game. And bishop d3. This is the second recommendation from the engine, but only one game here. The idea is that if you take, could be symbolically slightly better for white. Now white is ready also to allow the exchange, because white's idea is to play with a strong knight on c4 against the bishop. Also, this is equal, of course, rook b8, just equal. Let's say b3, bishop b4, whenever white plays a knight move with take and take the knight, so no problem. Or maybe white can play knight a3, knight c4, some small ideas, yeah? But we can play more tricky. We can play rook d8 move. Bishop takes f5 logical. We can take on d1, king d1, knight f5. And now, let's say when white will place his plans, knight d2, okay, bishop c5. Let's say king e2 normal move. You just play h5. King e7 just. Okay, bishop g5 at some moment, f6. What is the problem? f6. Let's say bishop f4 now. Okay, every move. Rook d8. Rook c1, let's say, yeah? Normal move. Rook d5. Just equal endgame. I don't think this move is good, yeah? Because we check and take on e5, yeah? Just equal endgame, yeah? So, in my opinion, dc4 is the most practical choice for black. In my and Alexei's opinion, yeah? Because here, you don't need to remember too many lines. Only line that you need to remember, I think, is this one, with the knight on d2. And you're fine everywhere, yeah? You can play a good endgame, yeah? It's not that we just play for draw, we play an endgame, yeah? Equal endgame. Only in the critical line we need to make some precise moves, but we can... By choosing this line, we can avoid a lot of theory, because if we play e6 here, white can play knight c3. And now bishop b4 main line, but bishop c5 also possible. Here, knight b3 possible line, yeah? I think bishop c5 is the best, if we go for this. But here, knight b3 is possible line, first option, or white can take. And here, white can try the positional cd5. Or white can try queen g4. And here you need to study some theory, for example, queen takes g7. Of course, black is very fine also here. But you need to study some theory. With our offer, dc4, you can avoid big theory and just play a game, yeah? Just play a game. So, of course, in the file, you also have e6 option. Just play an endgame, yeah? You also have e6 option in the file, but our main recommendation is dc4, yeah? So you choose, but you should know that we offer the safe dc4, yeah? As main recommendation. But you can also go for dc4 and you have the most, you also have e6 in the file and you have the most important points in the file. That's everything for today. Thanks for watching and see you in the next chapter. Bye.